There are places in the world that feel like they exist quietly, almost deliberately, just out of reach. Not hidden, not lost, just waiting. Waiting for the few who are willing to look a little deeper, travel a little farther, feel a little more. Far beyond the crowded streets of famous capitals, beyond the places that fill postcards and travel brochures, there is a land where mountains rise like ancient guardians, where rivers carve their stories into stone, and where time has never quite managed to move forward in the way the rest of the world expects. Here, the air carries something older than memory, a silence that is not empty, but full. Full of voices that have echoed for thousands of years, carried through valleys, preserved in monasteries carved into rock, whispered in forests that have outlived empires. This is a place where people still gather not just to eat, but to honor life itself, where wine is not a drink, but a language, where faith is not confined to buildings, but lives in mountains, in wind, in firelight. And yet, most of the world has barely heard its name. Because this country does not chase attention. It does not demand to be seen. It simply exists with a quiet confidence that feels almost sacred. And once you see it, truly see it, something shifts. Because this is not just a destination. This is something you feel. Between Europe and Asia, in a space where continents blur and identities intertwine, there is a country that has spent thousands of years standing at the crossroads of civilizations. Georgia rests between Russia to the north, Turkey to the southwest, Armenia to the south, and Azerbaijan to the east. A small country on the map, easy to overlook, impossible to forget. For thousands of years, armies have passed through this land. Persians, Mongols, Arabs, Ottoman Turks, Russians, each one leaving marks, scars, influences. And yet, somehow, Georgia remained unmistakably itself. Its language endured. Its traditions held strong. Its people refused to disappear into the shadows of larger empires. There is a quiet resilience here. Not loud, not boastful, but deeply rooted, like the mountains that rise along its northern edge, forming the greater Caucasus, where peaks stretch above 5,000 meters and glaciers move slowly through time. Georgia is one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. Long before modern nations were imagined, people here were already shaping culture, building communities, and perhaps most famously, making wine. Wine in Georgia is not a luxury. It is not a trend. It is something far older than that. For over 8,000 years, Georgians have been making wine using clay vessels buried in the earth, known as kvevri. This ancient method, recognized by UNESCO, is still used today. Grapes are crushed, placed into these vessels, and left to ferment naturally, just as they have been for millennia. Wine flows through Georgian life the way rivers move through its valleys. It is present at celebrations, at family gatherings, at moments of joy and moments of grief. It is shared, not just consumed. And nowhere is this more alive than at the Georgian feast, known as the supra. A table filled with food, laughter, stories, and long toasts led by a tamada, a toastmaster who guides the gathering with words that carry both weight and warmth. These are not quick meals. They are rituals, expressions of identity, a way of honoring life itself. The Georgian alphabet feels like an extension of that same spirit. Curved, flowing, almost musical in its appearance, it has existed for over 14 centuries. One of only a handful of unique writing systems in the world, it feels less like a tool and more like an art form. Faith runs just as deep. In the year 327 AD, Georgia became one of the first nations in the world to adopt Christianity. And that decision still echoes today. Monasteries cling to cliffs. Churches rise from valleys. Crosses stand on mountain peaks, watching over the land like silent witnesses to centuries of devotion. Georgia's position along the ancient Silk Road turned it into a meeting place of ideas, goods, cultures, and beliefs. Traders passed through. Poets found inspiration. Warriors fought for control. And through it all, Georgia absorbed, adapted, and remained whole. The geography of this country feels almost unreal in its diversity. Snow-covered mountains in the north. Warm black sea breezes in the west. Dry, semi-desert landscapes in the east. Lush green valleys that seem to stretch endlessly between them. All of it compressed into a space small enough to cross in a single day, yet deep enough to explore for a lifetime. And within this land, there are places that feel even more removed. Places where the modern world fades away completely. Tbilisi, the city of balconies. The first thing you notice about Tbilisi is not a building, or a monument, or even the river that cuts through the city. It is the feeling. A feeling that this place has lived many different lives at once. The streets twist through the old town, climbing hillsides and slipping between weathered brick houses with carved wooden balconies leaning over narrow alleyways. Laundry moves in the breeze above cobblestone paths polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. Church bells echo across rooftops while distant music drifts out from hidden courtyards glowing with warm light. Tbilisi feels ancient and alive at the same time. Europe and Asia do not simply meet here. They blend. The city sits along the banks of the Karau River, surrounded by hills that rise in every direction. Crumbling old houses stand beside glass bridges and modern architecture. Orthodox churches overlook contemporary cafes. Soviet apartment blocks watch silently from the hills above streets filled with wine bars and candlelit restaurants. And somehow, none of it feels out of place. Tbilisi has been invaded, burned, rebuilt, occupied, liberated, and transformed more times than almost any city should survive. Persians, Arabs, Mongols, Ottomans, Russians. Every empire left traces behind, and the city absorbed them all without losing itself. That is the magic of Tbilisi. It does not erase history. It carries it openly. At the heart of the old town, narrow streets curve between colorful balconies and centuries-old houses where daily life still unfolds slowly beneath the hills of Tbilisi. Hidden courtyards glow beneath warm lights while cafes and wine bars fill the evening air with conversation, music, and the feeling that the night is never in a hurry to end. Above the city rises Narikala Fortress, standing watch over Tbilisi for nearly 2,000 years. From the top, the view stretches across rooftops, churches, winding streets, and the river below, while the mountains in the distance remind you that Georgia is never far from wilderness. At sunset, the city changes color. Golden light spills across balconies and terracotta roofs. The Bridge of Peace begins to glow above the river. Conversations linger deep into the evening over wine and food. And then there are the balconies, hundreds of them. Some elegant and beautifully restored, others old and weathered, hanging slightly crooked with age. Together they give Tbilisi its soul. Because Tbilisi is not polished perfection, it breathes. in hidden courtyards filled with vines and old staircases, in street musicians performing beside ancient churches, in elderly men playing chess beneath trees while teenagers pass by speaking different languages at once. One moment, Tbilisi feels romantic and deeply European. The next, unmistakably Middle Eastern. Then suddenly Soviet. Then completely modern again. And through all of it, there is warmth. Not tourist friendliness. Something more genuine. People here invite you to stay longer. To sit. To eat. To become part of the rhythm of the city rather than simply passing through it. As evening settles over the city, Tbilisi slows into something softer and more intimate. Warm lights begin to glow across the old town, while conversations spill out from cafes hidden beneath balconies and narrow stone streets. Music drifts through open windows. Cars move slowly along the river. The city feels calm, unhurried, alive in its own quiet way. And from the hills above, the lights of Tbilisi stretch across the valley beneath the dark outline of the Caucasus Mountains. And standing above the city, watching the lights spread through the valley beneath the Caucasus sky, it becomes clear why so many travelers arrive here for a few days and end up staying far longer than they planned. Kazbegi, where the mountains touch the sky. The road north from Tbilisi begins gently. Rolling hills, small villages, rivers winding through valleys. And then the mountains begin to rise. Higher, sharper, more immense with every passing kilometer. The Georgian military highway cuts through the Caucasus like a pathway into another world. Clouds drift low across the peaks while rivers crash against stone deep below the road. And ahead, waiting beyond the curves of the valley, is Kazbegi. Stepan Sminda rests beneath one of the most iconic landscapes in all of Georgia. Mount Kazbek towers above everything here. A dormant volcano rising more than 5,000 meters into the sky, its summit hidden beneath snow and cloud for much of the year. The mountain feels less like part of the landscape and more like a presence watching over it. And standing on the hillside beneath it is Georgidi Trinity Church. Small, ancient, alone against the immensity of the mountains. Few places in the world feel this cinematic in real life. The church dates back to the 14th century, built high above the valley where it has endured storms, invasions, earthquakes, and centuries of isolation. But when you finally arrive, the silence is unforgettable. Wind moves through the grass. Clouds slide slowly across the mountain peaks. The stone walls of the church glow softly beneath changing light. And beyond it all rises Mount Kazbek itself, enormous and eternal. There is something deeply spiritual about this landscape, even for those with no religion at all. The scale changes you. It strips away noise. Life becomes simpler in the mountains. The villages scattered through this region move at their own pace. Horses graze beside rivers fed directly by glacier melt. Shepherds guide flocks through valleys that have looked the same for generations. Every direction feels endless. The weather changes constantly here. One moment the valley is clear beneath sunlight. The next, clouds roll in so thick they swallow entire mountains whole. And then suddenly they part again, revealing peaks so dramatic they almost feel unreal. Travelers come to Kazbegi searching for beauty, but what they often find is perspective. Because standing beneath these mountains reminds you how small human life really is. Not in a frightening way, in a freeing way. Problems feel quieter here. Time slows. Even breathing feels different. At night, the skies above Kazbegi fill with stars. Entire galaxies reveal themselves above the silhouette of the mountains while the cold air settles across the valley. And somewhere beneath that sky, tiny villages glow softly against the wilderness. Tiny, fragile, human, yet somehow enduring against impossible landscapes. Kazbegi does not feel conquered by civilization. It feels borrowed from nature. And perhaps that is why people remember it so deeply. Because places like this remind us of something modern life tries very hard to make us forget. The world is still wild. Batumi, Georgia's Black Sea dream. After the mountains, Batumi feels almost surreal. Palm trees sway beside the sea. Modern skyscrapers rise above old European facades. Neon reflections shimmer across wet streets, while waves roll quietly against the Black Sea shoreline. Nothing about Batumi feels like the Georgia most people expect. And that is exactly what makes it unforgettable. Located on the western coast near the Turkish border, Batumi has always been shaped by movement. Traders, travelers, sailors, merchants. The city grew as a gateway between worlds, absorbing influences from Europe, the Middle East, Russia, and the sea itself. Today, Batumi feels alive with contrasts. One moment, you are walking through elegant 19th century streets lined with ornate balconies and faded pastel buildings. The next, futuristic towers rise above you covered in lights and mirrored glass. The city feels warm in every sense of the word. Warm air, warm evenings, warm energy. The Batumi Boulevard stretches along the sea, shaded by palm trees and filled with cyclists, musicians, couples walking slowly beside the water, and children laughing beneath glowing lights as the sun disappears into the horizon. Sunsets here feel cinematic almost every evening. Orange light spills across the black sea while waves move gently against the shore. The skyline begins to glow. Reflections ripple across the water as music drifts through the evening air. And unlike the silence of the mountains, Batumi embraces movement. It pulses. Cafes stay open late into the night. Street performers gather along the boulevard. Ferris wheels light up against the dark sky, while boats move quietly through the harbor. Yet despite its modern energy, Batumi still carries traces of its older soul. Old churches stand quietly between contemporary buildings. Small alleyways lead toward hidden courtyards filled with vines and laundry lines. Elderly locals sit outside playing backgammon, while luxury hotels tower nearby. The sea defines everything here. Its mood changes constantly, calm and reflective in the morning, dark and restless during storms. Rain gives Batumi a completely different atmosphere. Streets shine beneath neon reflections. Mist drifts in from the sea. The entire city feels softer, more intimate. Food here carries the flavors of Western Georgia. Fresh seafood, khachapuri bubbling with cheese and egg, citrus fruits grown nearby, strong coffee beside the sound of rain against windows. Batumi is where Georgia exhales, where the intensity of the mountains gives way to warmth and movement and sea air. And perhaps that is why it surprises people so deeply. Because it reveals another side of the country entirely. Vibrant, evolving, alive beside the Black Sea. Kakheti, the birthplace of wine. In Kakheti, the landscape softens. The mountains fade into the distance, replaced by rolling vineyards stretching beneath endless skies. Small villages sit quietly among fields and cypress trees while narrow roads disappear into golden hills beneath afternoon light. This is the heart of Georgian wine country, and perhaps the heart of Georgia itself. Because wine here is not simply agriculture. It is memory. It is family. It is identity passed from one generation to the next for thousands of years. The vineyards of Kakheti have seen civilizations rise and disappear through invasions, wars, occupations, and revolutions. People here continued making wine the same way their ancestors always had, using kfevri, large clay vessels buried beneath the earth, where grapes ferment naturally over months in darkness and silence. Walking through traditional wine cellars feels like stepping backward through time. Rows of circular stone lids cover buried vessels beneath cool floors, while candlelight flickers softly against ancient walls stained by centuries of harvests. Outside, life moves slowly. Farmers work among the vines beneath golden evening light. Dogs sleep beside stone houses. Church towers rise quietly above fields where the wind carries the scent of earth and grapes. And then there is Sinagi, a hilltop town overlooking the Alizani Valley with the Caucasus Mountains stretching across the horizon beyond it. Narrow cobblestone streets wind past colorful balconies and ivy-covered walls, while the valley below glows green and gold beneath shifting light. Everything here feels romantic, real, the kind of beauty shaped slowly over centuries. Meals in Kakheti are never rushed. Tables fill with homemade bread, cheese, grilled meat, herbs, walnuts, and wine poured generously into glasses that never seem to stay empty for long. Stories last for hours. Toasts become emotional. Laughter echoes late into the night. And somewhere between the vineyards and the mountains, between the wine and the conversations, you begin to understand something important about Georgia. This country survives through connection, through family, through gathering together even in difficult times. That spirit lives strongest here. Kakheti does not overwhelm you with spectacle. It stays with you quietly, like the warmth of sunlight at the end of the day. Georgia is not just a place you visit. It is something that settles into you. It lives in the silence of its mountains, in the warmth of its people, in the taste of its wine, in the stories carried through its valleys and carved into its stone. It is a country that does not try to impress, and yet, it leaves a mark deeper than most places ever could. Because what you find here is not just beauty, it is meaning. And once you feel it, once you stand in those mountains, walk through those ancient spaces, sit at a table where strangers treat you like family, something changes. You begin to see the world differently, slower, deeper, more connected. And maybe that is what makes Georgia so rare. Not what it shows you, but what it awakens in you. And if one day you find yourself standing there, feeling that same quiet shift, you will understand something that cannot be explained, only experienced. And once you do, you will never see the world the same way again.